what makes you happy? Now, don't answer that out loud because you might shock someone, right? Especially if you're sitting next to your spouse and you don't say, well, my spouse. So don't answer out loud. It just gets you in trouble. But that's what we're talking about, is how to be happy. We live in a culture that, man, happiness is sold. Like they commercials are all about, man, in some way alluding to the purchase of whatever this is will make you happy. And it does, but we get confused the difference between pleasure versus happiness. That pleasure is momentarily, it makes you feel happy, but it doesn't give you longevity of happiness. And so you have to do another purchase to feel the pleasure. And so we're going to spend the next few more weeks talking about how to be happy. And we're going to talk about how Jesus wants us to be happy. And I love this topic because there's a lot of people in Western culture that just look miserable. And man, when I'm around miserable people, all I want to do is be extra happy. I want to make them like, no, it's really good to be on this side of the fence because I could be miserable, but that's just miserable. If you came in late, my name is Scott Mendenhall. That was my wife that was up here a moment ago. And I went to her just moments before she came up and go, hey, Holly, you look hot today. Would you jump up there and do the offering? She's like, no, you're not. You didn't. No, you know. I was like, no, for real, you got this. Go get it, champ. And sent her on her way. She loves it when I do that. She absolutely does. Like, it just made her so happy. She was in her happy place. And then when she came off the stage, she walks by me and she goes, my palms are sweating. It is, if you ever wonder what it is like to be around me 24 hours a day, it's an adventure, okay? It really is. You never know what's going to happen. And spontaneous things just erupt around me. Some are which bring a lot of happiness, and some bring fear, but I'm a guy that really, we say as a church, partnering with people to unlock their God-given greatness, I like to do that for everyone all the time. Like, if I see that there's a moment of like just a fear or weakness, I feel like it's my job to partner with somebody to go, no, you shouldn't be afraid of it. You got this. And as Holly's expressed that she gets nervous to be on the stage, I thought, well, we'd try something new today. I would spontaneously give her a shorter amount of time. She wouldn't have to be nervous as long. So I was really doing her a favor. I don't know if she sees it that way. We'll find out in about 30 minutes. I'll find out, okay? Because this will be done and we will have a conversation. And so follow the vlog on YouTube and you'll see what really what it was like, how her real thoughts were. And so thank you so much for hanging with us today. We enjoy what we're doing as a church, which is what I said a moment ago, partnering with people to unlock their God-given greatness. We want to do life with people. When you have your highs, we want to celebrate those. When you're down in the valleys, we want to celebrate those, and not in like throw a party, but we want to be there with you. We don't want to just say, hey, come around us when everything's good. We really want to be in the middle of it all. And again, that's going against Western culture, because Western culture is all about, man, do life alone, tuck your car into its bedroom and get back into your house as fast as you can so you don't have to see your neighbors. That's Western culture, where we're trying to say, hey, what if, as a church, we run after doing life with each other? And it's messy. Messy people helping messy people is another way we say it. And so I'm going to give you a quick story that I did not share last week, but it was an event some of you caught on this week if you follow the vlog. Just a crazy story that happened to me last Tuesday just before 9 o'clock. I was hit by a car. I was riding an electric skateboard. It was 22 miles an hour, and I was on the street. I had lights on, and I looked behind me, and I saw a car coming, and I knew that they were coming quite fast, and I was like, okay, they're going to get around me. I was on a 2-lane road, and they're going to go around. I look back again. They're a little bit closer. I'm like, they still have time. I look back one more time, and they're right there. And some reason, I decided to try to jump off my my skateboard at 22 miles an hour to get out of the way. And I jumped, got in the air, and then the car hit my feet and then spun me like a helicopter and threw me into the traffic. This all happened on Main Street over by Whole Foods. I landed in the turn lane to go into Whole Foods. I get up. And I watched my skateboard. It got stuck underneath the car as they drove away. And I got out of the street because there was more cars coming. And the gentleman that hit me finally realized he had hit something or someone. He backs up and comes back to me, rolls down the window. And he goes, he rose, he didn't say anything. I actually said, bro, you hit a human. I didn't say me, I just said you hit a human. I wanted like the severity of what just took place. I was like, a human being you hit. And I hadn't really looked at myself. I just knew my head hurt and my body already hurt. It was like instantaneous, like sore. And he began to just, I think my next statement was like, were you texting? And he said, no. And I was like, I don't know what to do, because I really didn't know. I mean, it's not like you prepare to be hit by a car at 50 some miles an hour. You just get whacked. You're not prepared for that. And so I was like, so I called Holly, my lovely wife, and it's that moment you're trying to calm the situation down on the phone, right? And so what do you start with? Like, don't freak out. That's where I started. It's like, that's the button you hit, right? That she freaked out. She's like, what happened? I'm like, no, I'm okay, seriously. But I did get hit by a car. And she's like, what? I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm all right. Don't freak out. She's like, I'm not freaking out, but I'm kind of worked up a little bit. And I was like, no, I'm okay. I think I'm all right. Don't come up here. We'll be all right. I just want you to know that, hey, I'm okay. And so she texts like, no, I'm coming up there. And I was like, yeah, probably a good idea. I don't know if the skateboard works. And so she came on her way, and I had talked to her on the phone. I was like, I don't know what to do. Should I call the cops? Should I not call the cops? Because I really, man, my gut, the thing in me was like, I don't want the young man that hit me, this could mess his life up. He hit a person. And as a pastor of 22 years, I've been in courtrooms where I was a youth pastor for 17 years, where you sit in a courtroom where a student hits someone, and the state typically steps in these situations because the victim doesn't. So I was like, man, if we make a big deal out of this, I would assume the state will jump in and just make this really messy. And so I just really wrestled, what do I do? And I even told that to the young man that hit me. I was like, bro, I don't know what to do. I don't want you to get in trouble, because he was very, very sorry. And we stood on the side of the road, and my body wasn't feeling right. And I was like, man, I'm going to call just in case tomorrow I wake up and I can't move my left arm. I go, so I call the 911, and they're like, what's your emergency? I was like, I got hit while riding my electric skateboard. And they go, did you say electric skateboard? They didn't even ask if I was all right. I was like, yes, electric skateboard. And then like, do you need an ambulance? I was like, I don't think so. And they're like, okay, we'll send an officer out. Officers on the way out. And so we had, it was like 10, 15 minutes of standing on the side of the road. And we had conversations, and he just, it's kind of an awkward conversation with a guy that just hit you. But I just said to him, man, what is your, do you know who Jesus is? On the side of the road, I was like, do you know who Jesus is? He's like, no, we haven't really gone to church. I didn't grow up in the church. And I was like, man, you hit a pastor. And so I just thought I would ask if you knew who Jesus was. Because it seems like Jesus might be getting your attention today. And I was like, man, Sunday is Mother's Day. I would love if you would come, and we'll give your mom a gift. And he kind of gave a puzzled look. And at that point, the officer's walking up. He goes, did you just invite him to church? Like, and you said you'd give his mom a gift? Because I've never walked up into a scene where somebody got hit and they're talking about giving their parents a gift. He goes, usually the victim is trying to get something out of this and really milking it. And here you are going to come to church. And he goes, I was like, yeah, officer, you should come to church too. You'll see what it's all about. And so we just sat there, and the officer's like, this is my first experience with an electric skateboard, so I need to go see what the laws are about this. And so he goes back in his squad car reading about electric skateboards, and comes back, yeah, it looks like you're all legal. You had lights on, your reflective bag on your back, you were on the right side of the road. Yeah, that was all okay. And he filled out a report, and I just said to the officer, hey, listen, I'm not trying to make a mess of anything. If there's any way we don't have to make a big deal out of this, that would be awesome. And so he's like, well, I'll just leave the paperwork sitting on my desk, and if you need to call in the next few days, then we'll sort it out from there. It'll just be filed as just an incident, not an accident. It's an incident, so it doesn't go on his record, and I just thank him for that. And we went away. Somebody keeps saying I don't paint it as well as, or as the reality of it as, a car at 50 some miles an hour hitting you. And I had a leather jacket on, and my left side hit the ground first. The leather jacket sleeve it's grinded down. The shoulder is all messed up of the jacket. But then that translates to really bruised sides, bruised ribs, the whole deal. But as I stood on the side of the road and realized what happened, it was like, man, remember how we talk about here at Unlock Church all the time, God, give us eyes to see where you show up and show off. There was no way I could ignore that Jesus just showed up. And the officer confirmed it for me. He's like, I don't normally roll up into scenes where a pedestrian is hit by a car at 50 miles an hour and they're standing on the side of the road cracking jokes, inviting people to church. He's like, that doesn't happen. And, for me, it was just like a reminder that, Jesus isn't done with me or Unlock Church or my family. It just spurs me on to that, man, life is short, let's get after it. And not after it to get stuff, but after in changing people's lives. And the coolest bit of the story, and the reason we didn't talk about it last week, was because the young man who hit me, his girlfriend came last week to church, and his mom came to church last week, and they hadn't been to church for a long time, if ever. And he texted me after church and said, I didn't know you could have so much fun in church. That has forever changed my life. And we've talked throughout the week, and he couldn't be here today because he had to work, but he let me know he wasn't going to be here today, which I just found that was just very cool. I did have conversations with Jesus this week. I was like, Jesus, if there's other ways to have people come to church, I'm all for that. Like, planting a flower for someone, I'm okay with that. It's just... a lot of things go through your mind, especially on the topic of happiness, that my happiness wasn't detoured in that moment of, man, my board, which I love, my electric skateboard, was all messed up, and I was messed up, and, you're bleeding all over the place, you're hurting, and I was happy. And it wasn't because of stuff, it's because, man, I'm a follower of Jesus, and Jesus is teaching me how to be happy in all circumstances. All circumstances. That somebody goes, how did you do that? How did you have the mindset to invite somebody to church? It's like, man, I've been practicing for that moment. I've been practicing for a long time of trying to be the most like Jesus, and I don't get it right all the time. It just happened to be that moment I did. And you hope that young man and his mom and his girlfriend, man, they do find Jesus. And you just, man, their lives will forever be changed. And I shared that story last week. If you were here and you're like, man, that dude, he seemed pretty slow. Yeah, I go in and out of slurring my words. I don't remember where I am sometimes, or I'll walk into a room and look around like, why did I come in here? And so those things sometimes get a little scary when you have moments where you can't get your thoughts to come out. And so if that happens today, just say, yeah, he has ADD and he has a concussion. This is the worst case scenario ever. And if you'd like to read the teachings online, you can go see what a concussed man and ADD man does with his time in front of people. Go to our website and watch it. And so I say that in that story is, man, we can get to this spot through a relationship with Jesus that our happiness doesn't have to do this. And it's a little less of the ups and downs. Instead of this drastic plummet down in the high highs, it's just this, man, no, my happiness comes from something else. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, because we all have different circumstances in here today. Not all of you got hit by cars, but you got a phone call you didn't want to get this week. Some of you, your job changed. A family member is really sick this week. You got news that you didn't want to get this week. And if those things get to us where we can't be happy, and I'm not talking about throwing a party, we've got it backwards a little bit, because if we let circumstances dictate our overall happiness, again, hear me, I'm not saying, and Jesus even speaks to it, and so If you're having those moments, Jesus is going to teach us how to be happy over the next moments. And we're going to use one of the most popular sermons. It's actually the first sermon that was really recorded by Jesus. We're so creative in the way we titled it. We called it the Sermon on the Mount because he happened to be on the mountainside. And so we called it the Sermon on the Mount. And this is where, after a couple different traveling moments for Jesus, men started and women started following him because he was doing miracles and doing some really cool stuff. So people just started following Jesus, going, what's this guy going to do next? I can't wait to see what this guy does next. And Jesus turns around at some point and he looks and goes, man, there's like thousands of people standing around here. Maybe I will leverage this moment and I will teach them. And so he begins to put some thoughts together in what we call the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to jump into the author Matthew's version. And some of you come here long and you're like, why do you always say the author Matthew, and why don't you just say the Bible? Now, I learned as a youth pastor that we were teaching our young people, hey, the Bible says this, and it's like, no, it's not. It's not because the Bible says so, it's because Jesus says so. And then when the students would graduate from high school and go to college, and then they're in some class, they have to have a bibliography for a source that they have to say that this is where they got it from. And the teacher would say, no, you can't write a bibliography on the Bible. There's just no form for it. But if you quote the author Matthew in the book that Matthew wrote and called it Matthew, now you can give a bibliography on it. You can give the time it was wrote, you got the author, and you have the things to do that. And all of a sudden, the professors, we had learned, they can't combat it now. They're like, oh wait, now it does. That is a valuable source for a book report or a report that you're writing. And so we just had shifted, saying, hey, the author Matthew, and these authors in the Bible, they all make up the complete Bible, but they authored their own books to record Jesus, especially in the Old or the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They recorded what Jesus said and did, so that we might be able to follow Jesus better. We might know what Jesus said when he was here on earth. And so the author Matthew, in his book called Matthew, chapter 5, verse 1. I'm going to read some of it and then I'll break it down for you. This is the Sermon on the Mount. We actually have a picture before we get in so you can picture where this is happening. This is what historians think was the spot where Jesus was teaching. Now, here's what's unique to this spot. I don't know if this is where the photo is taken. This is the exact spot they're saying Jesus spoke. But in this mountainside is a place that you can stand and you can talk without a sound system and your voice will carry. You ever been in a room like that? I remember traveling to Washington, D.C. and I was in a train station and they had me go stand in one corner of this train station and somebody else stood in another corner and we are a long distance away and you could whisper and you could hear each other over everything. It was just the way the acoustics were made. The mountainside has the ability to make the voice just carry. And so as he's teaching thousands of people at this moment, his voice is going to carry without some loudspeaker. And so that is where this sermon, this teaching takes place from Jesus. Imagine men and women sitting down, listening to Jesus. In the background, you have the sea there, and way back there, you got some mountains. And so this is the setting for Jesus' sermon, his teaching. And what we learned last week, as teachers taught in those days, they sat down. They would sit down and everybody else would sit down and they would begin to teach. And so Matthew records Jesus' actions and words here in Matthew chapter 5. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. And he said, "Blessed are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Before we get too much farther, because Jesus is going to use the word blessed a ton here. We read it as blessed in our culture. Blessed is like you get stuff. So you get stuff if you're poor in spirit. But then we read poor in spirit like, hold on, poor people don't get stuff. And so then you got to ask yourself, well, what does blessed actually mean? And so a little bit of studying, you realize that blessed in the Greek means happy. So when Jesus is speaking to the men and women on the Sermon on the Mount, he's not saying, blessed are those. He's saying, happy are those. Jesus' first teaching is about happiness. So Jesus wants us to be happy. Following Jesus should make you happy, not feel like it's work and torture. It's happy. Happy are those. And so Jesus begins to go, happy are those that are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So you sit there and go, but poor in spirit, I don't want to sign up for that. That sounds miserable. Poor? I can't have stuff? No. See, it's not about stuff here. Jesus is not trying to combat saying, hey, as a follower of Jesus, you can't have stuff. I said it last week. I like technology. I have an electric skateboard, okay? I have a car, and then I have an electric skateboard. I'm all about having stuff without having to go into debt, get stuff. I'm fine with it. This is not a talk about go and get rid of yourself stuff unless Jesus is telling you to do that. That's not what I'm saying. Poor in spirit is this. People who embrace their daily dependence on God regardless of what they have. Poor in spirit is realizing despite what I have and do not have, I depend on God for all of it. That the promotion I get at work is because of God. The money I receive is because of God. The cars I drive is because of God. It's a dependence on God. That's the poor in spirit. It isn't about running around in rags. But if that's fine, if that's the way you want, I know in our culture, it's like, oh boy, are you saying that I have to run in rags? Or are you saying I'm prosperity? I got to get real nice stuff. Man, you wrestle that out. I don't know. That's for you to wrestle. And so blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Like, when you depend on God as a follower of Jesus, like I was talking to somebody through our YouTube channel that's asking about what kind of church Unlocked Church was yesterday. And I said, man, we're a Christian church. We talk about being a follower of Jesus. And they're like, why did you feel like you had to say a follower of Jesus afterwards? I go, because I don't know what you think of when I say Christian. You might work with a Christian that it says they're a Christian, but then they don't act like. And so we're running after being a follower of Jesus. He's the guy. He's the Lord of our life. We're followers of Jesus. And so, man, I want to, as a follower of Jesus, to understand that those things I get are from Jesus. That I depend on God to show up and show off in my life. And I want all of us to get to the spot where we see God show up and show off in our lives. It's so much more fun. Because all of a sudden it's no longer, I'm just good enough. That's why I got the promotion. It's like, no, God must want me to have that promotion because there's a group of people that I can help. Or, man, God doesn't want me to have that promotion because there's stuff I still need to learn. It's the dependence that God knows what he's actually doing. That he has a plan for all of us. Instead of saying, oh man, I don't have my job anymore. I must have done something wrong. It's going, God, what you got planned? What you going to do? The expectations shift all of a sudden. God, man, I'm excited. I would love to have my job still, but man, what are you doing? How are you going to show up in my life? It's that poor in spirit because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. At this moment, Jesus comes along and really tears down the idea that rich people are happy people. Or he comes along and tears down the idea that, man, poor people are happy people. He really just says it's neither one. It's really a mindset. I depend on God. The moment you put your trust in riches instead of God, who richly provides, you're unhappy. Because now you think you control the outcome of events. But when you put it all in God's hands, you're going, hey, God, I need your grace and your mercy to show up in my life. I'm depending on you. See, we can influence outcomes, but we can't control them. If you're a parent, you really learn this. It's like you get an education. As your child gets older, you realize that you can influence your child. But you cannot actually control them, especially as they become teenagers. Right now, when they're like 2 and 3 years old, to me, that's the fun age because you just pick them up and go, yeah, I still can move you, okay? You just stay right there. But when they're 16 years old, there's a little bit more of, I'm just going to have to bear hug you kind of deal. It gets a little bit more violent. But little guys, you just pick them up. They can kick their feet all they want. You just hold them out real far. Like, yeah, just run in that air, man. Just go after it. You have a ball. And then you put them down, you know. There's a lot more what feels like control, but we can influence most situations. We can't control them. And the quicker we get to that, the more freeing it is, because then you're waiting for God to show up in all things. And then your mindset is, God's got to show up in this moment. Those moments where you're terrified about the situation in your life, you don't have enough resources to pay the bills, you have someone that is in critical condition, you immediately turn to God and say, God, I need you to show up. I need you to show up. Instead of, that's the last place you get. If you start there, that brings the happiness, the peace of, man, God's on the job. But before that moment you turn to God, it's a wrestle with, what can I do to control it? What can I say? Can I buy something? Can I do? And we're trying to control the happiness. Jesus goes on and says, happy are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. This is what I was saying a moment ago, where I was talking about happy doesn't mean we just like skip around like we're Smurfs all the time, like, woo, yeah, this is great, right? That's not genuineness. Happiness isn't a party all the time. Happiness is just understanding, hey man, God's got it under control. And when we get in these moments of where life has thrown us a curveball, and it could be through the financial area, it can be through health, it can be through relationships, it can be through an employment situation, we get into these moments where it is a right time to mourn. But in our culture, to mourn is embarrassing. We don't want people to know we're mourning. We don't want to let people know we're hurting on the inside. And so we hide it, we conceal it. And sometimes it gets translated in anger instead of sadness. It gets translated sometimes into rage, past anger. It just gets manipulated into something different than it is mourning. And Jesus is saying, hey, blessed are those who stay in the moment. When when bad things happen, when stay in the moment and they tell people, happy are they because they will be comforted. See, when we conceal the sadness in our lives, when we conceal the seasons of mourning in our life, when we conceal it, you miss the opportunity of somebody to come out to you, put their arm around you and say, I love you. What can I do to help you? How are you doing today? Sometimes you just miss the moment of somebody coming up and putting their arms around you and saying nothing, because sometimes that's what the moment requires. I ran into a guy that, and he went through a season where he lost a lot of people in his lives over a short period of time, like within months, 3 funerals he was having to go to, and it was like immediate family. And I was like, man, how are you handling this? Like, there was just no sign of mourning. There was no sadness. He just went on with life, riding his bike right next to me, out there riding our bikes. And he didn't show any signs of sadness. And he said, he didn't even like flinch when he said it. Oh man, when I start feeling sad, even if I'm in midday, I just go and get a drink really quick, because it just numbs the situation. Then I don't feel like I have to say anything. So he self-medicates himself instead of sharing with people, man, I'm really hurting. Because when we play the tough guy card or tough lady card, you miss the moments of being comforted. When somebody can come along and go, I've been there. I watched my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. They got pregnant with their 5th child. Zion was his name. And Zion, the medical community said, man, things aren't looking good for Zion. We think he's going to have some birth defects. And they ran a ton of tests on him. And they just said, hey, I think the best case scenario for you guys to do is just to end the pregnancy. And just to watch my brother and sister-in-law walk through this, their situation, they went under the opinion, man, Jesus can show up and show off still. So no, we're going to carry to term. We'll give birth to Zion, and we still think God could show up and show off. And they carried to term. Zion was born. Zion lived for a few days, went home with them, and he passed away. Very, sad moment. But what I watched with those two is they didn't shut people out. They talked about how much it hurt and how much sadness they had, and the things that I learned as they walked through it. But me as an outsider, I could come in and speak words of encouragement. Sometimes I would just show up, Holly and I would show up and sit in their basement, and we'd say nothing. It was just really quiet. But we knew what they needed at the moment was just a set of friends that just sat there and didn't ask them to say anything. How if you just sat there. but it was because they were sharing and grieving through the process. What's tremendous about their story, when you read things where Jesus talks about, God uses the bad things for good, and we're like, how does that even happen? This is a tragic event. But now, Josh and Robin, they have got a group of men and women that follow them that have gone through the tragic event of losing a little one and asking them, how'd you do it? And they get to speak into their lives going, we put our hope in Jesus in the middle. That's the only way we got through it. And we stayed in the moment. We didn't try to get over the morning too fast. We stayed in the moment because we found the longer we stayed there, the more we felt comforted. But the faster we tried to speed up that sadness, that moment in life that no one wants to go through, the faster we sped it up, the more we felt isolated, alone. It became heavier. The burden got harder to carry. But the more we talked about it, the more we expressed our sadness in our mourning, the more we were comforted. So stay in the moment. I wrote this when I was just thinking about that. The fear of dying will keep you from living. The fear of failure will cause you to step back and not into the moment. And a lot of times in those moments of mourning, the sadness, the embarrassment of losing a job is we pull back because the fear of failure, the fear of expressing how we feel because we're afraid of what might somebody say to us. But then you're missing out on truly living, and you're missing out in the moment. Jesus continues, happy are those, are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now in Western culture, the word meek, we're just like, no. Meek sounds like weakness. I don't want that. We're supposed to be tough and just carry, we got it. But Jesus comes along, no, happy are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. But meekness is not about being weak or less than. It is a proper valuation of us in the story. That meekness is a reminder that we are a part of the story. We are not the story. Okay, I'm going to say that one more time. Hopefully it sinks in. We are a part of the big story, the Jesus story. We're a part of that. But we are not the story. We are not the main character in the story. We are like some way down character, and they're not to make us hang our heads, but we just we're not the main character of the story. It's Jesus is this main thing in the story, and meekness reminds us that, hey, we are not the main character. It's not, again, hanging our heads. It should excite you that, wait, Jesus is the main character in the story, so why would I not want to follow him more? Why would I not want to learn more about Jesus? Why would I not want to put him number one in my life? Meek people, or a meek person evaluates oneself as they are. They are God's creation and a part of the big plan. They know they are part, but not the center of the plans. That's a tough one. And again, as I roll through this is Jesus' first teaching, okay? This is a lot he's saying in one moment. He didn't just go one point going, okay, my first point, and we'll just let you all stay here. We're just going to say this one thing right here at the beginning. Happy are those that are poor in spirit. Okay, now go work on that. We'll talk about the next point next day. No, he rattles all of this off. And today, my hope is that Jesus speaks to you on one of these. Don't go, I got to work on all of this stuff. Oh my gosh. No. Pick whatever's the biggest one for you and go, that's the one Jesus needs me to speak on. And so Jesus goes on, happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Hunger and thirst means I want to be more like Jesus. Righteousness is a big, big Bible word that you're like, yep. The only time I hear righteousness in this culture is from the Ninja Turtles, okay? And they're like talking about some kind of pizza. We don't say it in the way that righteousness here is becoming more like Jesus, that we are a group of people that are saying, yeah, you know what? I do want to be more like Jesus. And we're okay saying that. I know that all of us in this room, we're coming from different backgrounds, different things happening in our lives, different levels of where we want to be a follower of Jesus. But man, if I can give you any wisdom, being a follower of Jesus is one of those things that in your life that will change you forever. Like all the desires that you have in your life, you'll actually find probably start to happen in a version that you didn't see happening, because all of a sudden it's about, man, what does Jesus have to say on this topic? And so it's to have this hunger for that. If you want to know where Jesus ranks in your life, the things we love the most, we talk the most about. So in conversations, if you talk the most about you, guess who you love the most? You. If you're married and you're in a conversation, you talk about your spouse the most, guess what? You love your spouse the most. Now, husband and wives, don't go evaluating this afternoon, listening to your other spouse's conversation. I did not hear you mention me one time, and you don't love me at all. Don't do that. That's dangerous. But the things we love the most, we talk the most about. And so, is there a hunger and thirst about Jesus? Are you sitting there and talking about Jesus at some course in the 24 hours a day? That will give you an indication how much you want Jesus. How much do you talk about Jesus? If you are an Instagram or a Snapchatter or Facebooker, how much does Jesus come up in your feed? How much are you talking about, man, I'm just trying to do what Jesus asks me to do? And I'm not checking your social media. This isn't like I'm coming and saying, hey, you guys. No, this is between you and Jesus. This is a relationship with Jesus is a personal relationship with Jesus. It is not a relationship between the pastor, you and Jesus. It's between you and Jesus. I think if we learn to be a follower of Jesus, we will hear Jesus, and Jesus will speak to us on some said topic, and we'll go, okay, I got this. So I wrote it like this after, man, happy are those that hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled, they will be satisfied. Happy are those with no guilt, no regret, and a clear conscience. When we're trying to be like Jesus, we're going to do the right thing. We're going to begin to say the wise thing. We're going to not get ourselves into trouble because we're trying to be more like Jesus. So it's a journey. It's not one big jump like, woo, I'm right here now. I'm like so much more like Jesus. No. It's just little steps. Okay, I'm going to get angry one less time this week. I'm going to spend a little less money this week. I'm going to stop talking like that this week. It might be months. It might be years. And it's just a journey inside the relationship with Jesus. But as you journey, you have less guilt to manage and regrets. But if you are not trying to be like Jesus, then you still have to manage the regrets, which regret and guilt robs your happiness. And Jesus is trying to remind us of that. And then what happens is as we feel guilty and we have a conscience that regrets things, what we end up doing is we have to continue to seek pleasure to get happy again. And so we seek pleasure, we spend money we shouldn't, we drink things we shouldn't, or too much, we consume too much of something, and it's to medicate ourselves of feeling regret and feeling guilty. And Jesus says you don't have to live like that. If you are amped, excited about going after me, you'll be filled. We don't have to regret doing the right thing. It's the wrong things that stop us from being happy. Jesus goes on, happy are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Jesus is teaching a principle here, you reap what you sow. If you don't like the way people are teaching you or treating you, somewhere you are treating someone like that. You reap what you sow. Now think about that. That'll change a lot of things. Hold on. So what I'm reaping in my life somewhere, and I'm not saying this is but a lot of times that's the case, is that we are treating somewhere like the way we don't want to be treated, and therefore we're reaping it. But Jesus says, happy are those that are merciful, so they will be shown mercy. Happy are the relationally generous people. We don't show mercy to lawnmowers. I mean, when my lawnmower doesn't start, I hit it with a hammer because I think that's what's going to help make it start. I mean, growing up, I watched my dad hit it with a hammer. I did learn that there's a little bit of like where you hit the lawnmower with the hammer is the key. I just hit it with the hammer, okay? It doesn't work. It's somewhere where there's this float that gets stuck. Honestly, I called my dad last summer. My lawnmower wouldn't start, and I was like, Dad, I've been hitting the lawnmower with a hammer, and it's not working. He's like, what? I'm like, I watched you growing up hit it with the hammer. He's like, where are you hitting it? I was like, down by the blade. I'm like, it must be stuck or something. He's like, no. He goes, you got to find out where the float is. I'm like, I don't know motors very well. I was like, there's a float in this, like a pool buoy? Like, where is this thing? He's like, no. He's like, and you could just hear him get slightly frustrated with this. He's like, this is embarrassing. You're my son. You don't know where this is. And so he like sends me a picture. Look for this, then look for that, and then tap. Tap it. Well, I didn't get the tap part. I found it and I hammered it, okay? And I dented where the float was, so the float didn't float at all. It was stuck between wherever I dented. Long story short, I bought a new lawnmower. I had no mercy on that lawnmower, trust me. But when it comes to people, it's mercy. It's giving them grace, going, man, I've lost my temper. I've cut somebody off before. I've been late before. If we would behave like that, we would find ourselves more happy because we understand that we're giving mercy as we've received mercy from Jesus. How in the world, I got asked this a lot, so I'm repeating the question somebody's asked me, how in the world could you have sat there on the side of the road and invited the young man to church and talked about Jesus to them? Why were you not angry at him? And really, I don't know. But I do remember sitting on the side of the road and thinking for a moment, man, I've been forgiven a lot by Jesus. More than I ever understand, probably. And I remember on the side of the road vividly thinking, man, the quicker I forgive this guy, the better off it is for both of us. And just forgave him because I have been forgiven a lot. I've messed up. I know me. I know the thoughts that I have that are embarrassing. I know the words that come out of my mouth sometimes towards my wife that I wish wouldn't come out. And I gotta tap on Jesus, go, Jesus, will you forgive me again? I wish I wouldn't speak like that. And so when we realize how much we've been forgiven and how much mercy we've been given through Jesus, we turn around and give that to others. And we find ourselves happy. Happy are those that are pure in heart, for they will see God. I wrote it like this when I read that, or happy are the pure in heart. You don't have to experience all things to see clearly to avoid some experiences in life. You will see God before all experiences. Like, man, dealing with young people, like, oh, I just want to experience life, and then I'll know what way I want to live life. And that's just, no. The pure heart says, I'm going to try to do the right thing as much as I can. I'm going to be pure with what I see and what I listen to. I'm going to be pure at heart. My intentions is to be pure. And so then I will see God. Jesus goes on and says, happy are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. I wrote it like this. I asked a question. Do you know any troublemakers that are happy? No, you don't. No, troublemakers are miserable people. I wrote it like this. Happy are the reconcilers of life. Happy are the peacemakers, those that make peace instead of stirring up drama. Blessed are, and Jesus wraps it up, blessed are the persecuted because of righteousness. Or happy are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That we understand that our perspective of life is, hey, when this is all said and done, I can't take the toys with me. There might be boosted boards, electric skateboards in heaven, I'm not sure, but they're really fun. And so there might be a few of those there. But Jesus is trying to say, hey, we're not living for the things here. We are living for something beyond this. And when we have that perspective, we're going, man, then it changes the things here on earth that really shake us up. And as I said before, or summing all this up, and we sow our way to happiness. Jesus really is trying to say you sow your way to happiness. It's not just one thing that makes you happy. You sow your way to happiness. Happiness is a result. It's not an outcome. It's a result of something. So as I made this long list today, where is it for you that you need to work on today?